Hi, I'm Lorena. On the day I was supposed to say I do, my mother-in-law stood up, snatched the mic, and said, "Hand over your $9,000 salary and serve this family. Or walk out now." Everyone froze. My husband didn't say a word, so I walked away. Alone. Or at least, I thought I did. Hours later, they were on their knees, begging me to save face for the family. Ever wonder what happens when a bride decides she's had enough? Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? They say weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life. I wanted to believe that. God, I really did. Standing there in the back hallway of St. Augustine's Church, clutching my bouquet like it could hold my spine together, I whispered to myself, "Today is supposed to be mine." But even as I said it, something in me flinched. It didn't feel like mine. Not really. I'm Lorena, the youngest daughter in a family where the youngest always meant least. I learned early that silence made things easier. Be the peacekeeper. Don't ask for much. Smile when they overlook you. Nod when they dismiss you. That's how you earn love. Right? The church smelled like lilies and polished wood. The choir rehearsed a few bars. Laughter floated in from the entryway. But under all that, there was a tightness in the air, like someone had pulled a thread too far and the whole thing was ready to snap. I peeked around the corner. Guests had begun filling the pews. Aunt Marjorie from Randall's side was already fanning herself dramatically, lipstick smudged, whispering too loudly. $9,000 a month? I heard she makes that much. For what? Typing emails? I kept smiling, the kind you stretch across your face so no one sees your teeth clench underneath. Then I heard it. My name. Wrong again. Lorena? Lorena? Lorena, I corrected gently. "Oh, well, close enough," the woman said, already turning her back. That's when Nadine swept in. Randall's mother, always dressed like she had a meeting with God at noon and brunch with the governor at 1. She kissed cheeks mechanically, her pearls clicking like a warning bell. "She's lucky to marry into a family like ours," Nadine said, loud enough for everyone near the front to hear. "She'll learn what it means to serve." I looked at Randall, my soon-to-be husband. He stood there fixing his tie like it was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. His eyes darted away from mine the moment I looked at him. I swallowed. Again. Inside the sanctuary, everything looked picture-perfect. White ribbons on the pews, sunlight catching the stained glass windows just right. But it all felt off. Like I was walking into someone else's day. Like I was the prop, not the bride. My father had arrived a little late. Traffic, he said. But when I saw where he was seated, back row, nearly behind a column, I felt something twist in my gut. Nadine's side was seated front and center, all perfectly lined up. But my father, the man who walked me through scraped knees and broken hearts, was practically hidden. I wanted to say something. I opened my mouth, closed it. Not now. Don't cause a scene. Keep the peace. Smile. "Lorena, family photos," the coordinator called. I stepped up, bouquet in hand, heart pounding for no reason I could explain. Nadine positioned everyone like a military commander, her sons, daughters-in-law, cousins, even a woman I'd never seen before. I hovered to the side, waiting for my spot. The photographer looked at me, uncertain. "Should she be in this one?" he asked Randall. Randall didn't answer right away. He laughed awkwardly and said, "Maybe one with just Mom's side first." So I stood there, like I had so many times before in my life, waiting to be included, wondering if I ever really was. "Smile," someone called, and I did. I smiled so wide it hurt. But inside, something cracked. Not all the way, just enough. As they shifted to a new setup, Someone handed me a bottle of water. I took it with a nod, my hands trembling slightly. I wasn't nervous about the vows, or the dress, or the people. I was afraid that what I'd been pushing down for years was about to surface, and I didn't know how to stop it. And yet, I kept telling myself, this is just the start. It's just one odd moment after another. Weddings are always a little messy. This'll all smooth out. I watched Randall from across the room, laughing with his cousins. He looked free, untouched, like none of this weighed on him at all. The choir began again. I adjusted my veil. Someone touched up my lipstick. I took a deep breath. I told myself it was only the beginning of the day. Little did I know, it was also the beginning of the end. And then, the first cut came, not with a knife, but with words dressed as kindness. We moved from the sanctuary to the reception hall, a short walk through the church's shaded courtyard. I could still hear the bell from the final hymn echoing faintly in the distance, like a warning I hadn't understood in time. The hall was cool, decorated with strings of white lights, and smelled of fresh bread and vanilla frosting. It should have felt like a celebration, but all I felt was the weight of that bouquet still in my hands. What once symbolized love now felt like a shackle. I tried to shake it off. I told myself to stay focused, smile for the photos, say thank you to the guests, pretend like the words Nadine whispered during the recessional hadn't sliced straight through my gut. Sacrifice, she'd said with a tight smile. That's what makes a good wife. As we entered the reception hall, Randall pulled out a chair for me at the long family table, then quickly sat down next to me without saying a word. His hand brushed mine, but it was a touch that said, play along, not, I'm here with you. Appetizers were already being served, waiters moving with practiced speed. I watched a shrimp cocktail tremble slightly as a plate was set in front of me. The clatter of silverware, bursts of laughter from distant cousins. I was surrounded by celebration but detached from it, as though I were underwater. Nadine stood at the head of the table, holding a wine glass as someone handed her the microphone. The hum of the crowd faded as people turned toward her. First of all, she began, her voice smooth and practiced, thank you all for being here to witness my son become a husband today. What a blessing it is to welcome someone new into our family. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lorena is a lucky woman, she said, to join a family like ours, one that believes in values, in tradition, in loyalty above all else. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like something tightening with each syllable. My fingers curled slightly around the napkin in my lap. Randall has always been a man of strong character, she continued. We raised him with a deep understanding of what it means to lead, and what it means for a partner to support that. There was a pause, then a shift. Of course, Lorena is accomplished in her own right. A $9,000 monthly income, I've heard. Impressive. And I know, truly know, that she'll use her success to serve the greater good of this family. The room didn't gasp. That would have been easier. No, it was worse. A low murmur spread like a ripple. A few eyebrows lifted. Forks hovered mid-air. Somewhere to my left, someone chuckled. I stared down at my plate, suddenly unable to breathe. The pasta looked congealed. The candles flickered. Randall didn't speak, didn't flinch. He just took a sip of his water and avoided my gaze. I turned to him, barely whispering, "Did you know she'd say that?" He didn't answer, just dabbed at his mouth with his napkin and said, "She's just talking." No, she wasn't. She was performing. And I was the punchline. I looked across the table, and there he was, my father. His hands were folded tightly in his lap, his jaw was clenched, eyes locked on Nadine with a look I hadn't seen since the day he confronted my high school principal for calling me too emotional. He glanced at me, lips pressed together, then gave a slow nod. The kind that says, I see you. I know this isn't right. But he didn't stand. He didn't speak. And I understood why. He didn't want to ruin what he thought was still my day, but it already felt ruined. I didn't belong at that table. I felt like a guest in my own life, politely smiling while being erased. I thought of all the dinners growing up where my older siblings got the bigger portions, where I was praised for being the good girl when I gave mine away. I used to wear that as a badge of honor. "She's always so considerate," my mother would say. "She doesn't need much." Maybe that's how it all started. Maybe that's when I learned that to be loved, I had to shrink. I looked around the room and realized something. No one was going to speak up for me. Not Randall. Not his family. Not even my own father. If I stayed quiet now, I'd be setting the tone for the rest of this marriage. A silence that would swallow me whole. Still, I didn't say anything. Yet. Because Nadine wasn't done. She passed the mic off to the DJ for a moment, but her eyes never left me. Her smile had started to change. It wasn't warm. It wasn't maternal. It was the kind of grin you see on someone who's about to cash a check they think you owe them. And then Nadine's smile sharpened into a blade. She wasn't finished yet. Because when she grabbed the mic again, she didn't just speak about sacrifice, she demanded obedience. The room hadn't yet recovered from her first blow when Nadine stepped forward again. She didn't wait for the DJ or any signal. She took the mic like it belonged to her. Like the day belonged to her. Like I didn't exist. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations went still. Even the waitstaff froze at the edge of the hall. She didn't ease into it. She went straight for the throat. "Lorena earns $9,000 a month," Nadine said, her voice firm and ringing clear through the sound system. "And starting today, that money belongs to this family." It was quiet for a second. Too quiet. Then came the ripple. A gasp from somewhere near the cake table. Shifting chairs, awkward chuckles trying to pass this off as a joke, but there was no joke in her face, not a flicker. I stared at her, stunned, like I'd just been slapped in front of a crowd. Because that's what it felt like. No ceremony, no subtlety, just a blow laid bare for all to see. I turned to Randall. "Please, say something." But he didn't meet my eyes. He stared straight ahead, his jaw locked, his hand adjusting his tie again, like the knot would save him. Like if he stayed busy enough, he wouldn't have to pick a side. "Randall?" I whispered, low but sharp. Nothing. He reached for his water glass, took a sip, then cleared his throat softly. That was his answer. The silence felt heavier than Nadine's words. I thought of my mother in that moment. Not the sick version of her at the end, but the one who used to stand in our tiny kitchen with a cigarette in one hand and a dish towel in the other, telling me, "Don't you ever let anyone spend your spirit like it's their pocket change." She'd said it the first time I let a boyfriend walk all over me. She said it again when my boss made me take the fall for a project that wasn't my fault. And now I could almost hear her saying it again. Only this time, I was watching it happen in real time. Nadine hadn't just disrespected me. She'd claimed me, my time, my worth, my earnings, like I was a transaction, a dowry to be deposited. "Let's be honest," she went on, pacing now like she was delivering a sermon. "A wife doesn't just marry a man. She marries into a family. And in this family, we support each other. We give, we share, we invest in our own." She looked directly at me then. "It would be selfish to keep all that to yourself, wouldn't it, Lorena?" Her voice still had that smile wrapped around it, but the edge beneath it could cut glass. A few people laughed, those polite, awkward laughs that people use when they don't know how to respond. Others looked down at their plates or off to the side, pretending they hadn't heard. Pretending they weren't witnessing a public power play dressed up in the language of family values. I could feel the back of my neck burning. And my hands had gone cold. From across the table I caught my father's eyes again. His face was stone. No expression, just a steady stare, like he was bracing himself for a wave and couldn't move. Maybe he thought I could still walk it off. Maybe he didn't want to make it worse. But it was already worse. It wasn't just the money, it was the control. The way she said, "this family," like I wasn't part of it, like I had to earn my place with a paycheck. I stood, slowly. People looked up, surprised. Nadine paused, but only for a breath before continuing. "I'm sure Lorena understands what's expected. She's smart, independent. But smart women know when to contribute, when to submit. That's how strong marriages are built." There it was. She wasn't asking. She was commanding, publicly, like this was a test, and Randall's silence was the confirmation. And when Nadine looked at me, microphone trembling in her hand, I knew this wasn't a speech. It was an ultimatum, because the next words out of her mouth weren't just cruel, they were a command. "Hand it over or walk out now." Those exact words. Nadine said them with a smile so wide it barely held back the venom underneath. Her voice filled every corner of that hall, bouncing off the chandeliers, seeping into every ear. Nobody moved. A fork hung mid-air in someone's hand. A child dropped a napkin, and it landed with the sound of thunder. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, louder than the gasps and the murmured, "Did she just say that?" I looked around for a sign, anything that said I wasn't the only one who thought this was madness. But most people avoided my eyes. Some glanced down, some took awkward sips of champagne. Others, Randall's side, mostly, just sat there like this was normal, like this was how love was supposed to work. Then came the clapping. At first, one pair of hands, too loud, too deliberate. Randall's cousin Troy, who'd had one too many beers and was always too quick to laugh at anything Nadine said, started it. "Bravo, Aunt Nadine," he said. "Tell it like it is." A few others chuckled. Some clapped along like they were at a show and didn't want to be the only ones not applauding. I felt like I was standing on a stage, except I hadn't signed up to be part of this act. And the applause? It wasn't support. It was mockery. I stood there, bouquet still in my hands, gripping it so tight my knuckles turned white. I looked at Randall. This was the moment. The moment where he should have stood up and said, "Enough." But instead he leaned toward me, finally, and muttered under his breath, "Maybe just listen, Lorena. It's tradition in our family." Tradition. My stomach twisted. My eyes burned. His words were colder than hers. He wasn't caught off guard. He wasn't confused. He knew. He agreed. Tradition. What kind of tradition demands you hand over your worth like a dowry in front of strangers? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat clenched, like if I spoke, I'd either scream or sob, and I didn't want to do either. Not here, not in front of them. So I stood still, frozen. But inside, everything was boiling. I thought about every time I'd bent for other people. When I'd sent my brother my savings so he could start fresh after getting fired. When I'd skipped Christmas to cover someone else's shift. When I'd smiled through slights and swallowed words that should have been said. And now, here I was, on my wedding day, still being asked to give. Was this what I was raised for? I looked down at the bouquet. White peonies. My mother's favorite. She used to grow them in mismatched pots on our fire escape back in Corpus. Said they were stubborn flowers, had to fight through heat, wind, and pigeons, but still bloomed soft. I gripped the stems tighter, and a few petals snapped under my fingers. I didn't flinch. Maybe I'd been training for this moment my whole life. To be silent, to be the good girl. To let the louder ones take the mic and call it love. But something inside me felt different now. Not loud yet, but steady. A quiet fury that burned instead of shook. Nadine hadn't stopped. She was talking again, about values, unity, loyalty. Her voice rose and fell like a preacher on Sunday. But all I heard was a demand. All I saw was a woman dressing control in pearls and perfume. And Randall? He sat there, sipping water. My father caught my eye across the room. Still seated, still silent. But there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Regret. I knew then I couldn't count on anyone to stop this for me. This was my moment. I didn't move. Not yet. I wasn't ready to fall apart or fight back. But I wasn't shrinking either. Because when Nadine raised the mic once more, I felt something inside me finally crack. Because this time, her cruelty wasn't hidden between lines. It was shouted for everyone to hear. I stood there, still as the candles flickering on each table, watching Nadine raise her glass like she was delivering a toast and not a blow. The lights from the chandelier above caught the crystal in her hand, sending tiny shards of light across the floor. But the sparkle didn't soften her words. Nothing could. Obedience or walk out, she had said. And now all that remained was the silence that followed. No music, no polite laughter, no clinking of silverware. Just that kind of airless quiet where everyone's holding their breath, wondering what's about to snap. Someone near the dessert table whispered too loudly, "Well, she married into money. What did she expect?" A few people chuckled. Nervously, cruelly. The kind of laugh that says they don't see you as real anymore, just a cautionary tale in lace and heels. My knees didn't buckle, but they wanted to. They didn't see a bride. They saw an outsider who didn't know her place. A salary, a headline, a mistake. I looked out at the room full of strangers who were supposed to be my new family. They looked right back at me with a strange mix of satisfaction and amusement, like this was exactly the scene they came for. I barely noticed the scraping sound at first. But then I saw him. My father. He had pushed his chair back. His fists were clenched against the edge of the table. He looked at me, then at Nadine. His jaw twitched. For a second, just one, I thought he was going to stand, say something, remind them who raised me, what I came from. But then, just as quickly, he looked down and sat back, shoulders slumped, lips pressed into a thin line. Not because he didn't love me, but because he'd done the math. He knew his voice wouldn't carry in this room, not against theirs. It broke me a little, seeing that. Seeing him shrink in the same silence I had learned to survive in. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls tighter, like I was trying to breathe through wet cloth. I don't remember when I sat down, or if I even did, really. I just remember looking at my plate, food untouched, wine warm, and feeling like I was floating somewhere just outside my own body. What had I done? What had I walked into? This was supposed to be mine. This day. This love. And I'd handed it over like a gift I wasn't even allowed to wrap myself. My whole life, I'd been told I was easy. Quiet. Good. I made things easier for everyone else. Bit my tongue when things stung, smiled when it hurt, carried other people's burdens like I was born for it. But tonight, being good didn't save me. It made me a target. Someone's napkin fluttered down near my feet, one of the flower girls, no more than 6. She bent to pick it up, but I got there first. And when I did, I caught a glimpse of myself in the back of a fallen spoon. The reflection was warped, but not enough to hide the red in my eyes. The way my lips trembled, not with emotion, but restraint. It was that small moment, kneeling there in my own gown, picking up someone else's mess, that shook me harder than Nadine's speech. Do I want this to be the face I carry into marriage? This face, afraid to speak, ashamed to exist, too polite to scream. I looked up, slowly, like waking from a long sleep. Nadine raised her glass again, smug and glowing like she'd already won the war. But something inside me stirred. A flicker. Small, but defiant. Not rage. Not yet. But the beginning of it. A truth I hadn't let myself believe until this very moment. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to let me keep anything, my dignity, my peace, or my name, unless I took it back. And as Nadine smirked, raising her glass like she'd already won, I felt the first ember of something I hadn't felt in years: defiance. Because the moment I straightened my back, I knew silence would no longer save me. Nadine's laughter was still echoing in the corners of the reception hall, sharp, artificial, almost theatrical. She held her wine glass high, as if she were some crowned queen, not just a woman drunk on power and Chardonnay. She didn't realize I was watching her differently now. She didn't realize I wasn't afraid anymore. The clink of silverware returned slowly, hesitantly, like the room didn't quite know whether the show was over or just getting started. I felt my fingers slide over the edge of the linen napkin in my lap, soft, smooth, still as unused as the plate in front of me. Then I heard myself speak. It wasn't loud, it wasn't shouted, but it sliced through the air like it had been waiting years to be born. "If this family thinks I'm here to be bought or broken," I said, each word deliberate, "you've already lost me." Every head turned. Utensils froze mid-air. Even the waitstaff paused in the wings, holding trays of untouched desserts. My voice didn't tremble. That was the most surprising part. I expected my throat to catch, for my stomach to flip, but all I felt was heat rising in my chest, burning away what little doubt remained. Randall stiffened beside me. His body tensed, like I had reached beneath the table and pressed a trigger. He leaned in, his voice a whisper so tight and sharp I could feel it graze my cheek. "Stop embarrassing me." Then came the pressure on my wrist. His hand, cold and rigid, clamped over mine beneath the tablecloth. Not enough to bruise, but enough to say exactly what he couldn't say aloud. "Don't you dare." I looked down at our hands. His fingers curled over mine like they owned something. I didn't pull away, not yet. I wanted to feel the weight of it, remember it, because that grip was no longer just about control. It was confirmation. Randall was never going to choose me, not when it counted. I turned to face him fully for the first time all evening. Our eyes met. He didn't blink, neither did I. That was the moment I stopped wondering whether I had overreacted, whether I was too sensitive, whether keeping the peace was worth it. He had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. Nadine's laughter picked up again, forced, almost too loud, rattling off her wine glass like it was part of her act. "Oh, honey," she called out, voice honeyed with venom. "Let her play tough tonight. By morning, she'll be just another wife who obeys." More chuckles rippled through the room. This time, they weren't nervous. They were entertained. That was the part that stung the most. Not her words, but how easily people swallowed them. I looked across the tables, faces I'd smiled at in passing, hands I'd shaken just hours earlier. They weren't horrified, they weren't confused, they were waiting to see what I'd do next. I could almost hear their thoughts. Would she cry? Storm out? Swallow it like a good wife? But I didn't do any of those things. Not yet. Instead, I took a long breath, in, out, just like my mother used to tell me when I was little and holding in tears. Then I leaned slightly toward Nadine's side of the table, not a confrontation, just enough so she knew I was done being polite. "You keep mistaking kindness for weakness," I said softly, only loud enough for the people closest to hear. "You should fix that." Her smile faltered, just a flicker. But I saw it, and that flicker was enough to fan the spark. The chandeliers overhead seemed colder now. The entire hall looked like a movie set, glossy and artificial. Every detail, white roses, gold chairs, polished cutlery, looked absurd next to the ugly truth unfolding at the center of it all. I looked down the table toward my father. He met my gaze, and for the first time that night, he nodded. Subtle, but firm. A father's nod. One that didn't beg or warn, but said, "I see you. Go ahead." I hadn't realized how badly I needed that. Nadine waved her hand, trying to laugh it off. "She's feisty tonight. Must be all the champagne." Someone, Probably one of Randall's cousins muttered, "She'll learn soon enough." That did it. I stood, not in a rush, not angrily, just stood. I didn't look at Randall. I didn't owe him another glance. I didn't care if his mother raised an eyebrow or if her friends clutched their pearls. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, tucked a curl behind my ear, and turned to face the room. Every table, every guest, every set of eyes. The microphone sat 3 feet from me, resting near the DJ's station, waiting for another toast, another speech. I didn't take it. Not yet. That moment would come later. Instead, I placed my napkin gently on my plate. The silence stretched again. Then I said clearly, voice calm, "I'll be back." And I walked toward the hallway behind the reception room, my heels clicking with purpose. Not running. Not retreating. Moving. Some might have thought I was going to cry in the restroom, or that I needed air. Let them think it. Because the truth was, I wasn't leaving to escape. I was leaving to return, with fire. I could hear murmurs behind me, the swell of whispers. What's she doing? Is she okay? Where's Randall? But none of it mattered. Something inside me had shifted, a quiet that wasn't born from fear, but from control. I passed the glass doors, the soft light of evening casting long shadows on the floor. And as Nadine turned back to the crowd, basking in her imagined victory, I rose from my chair, ready to strike in a way she'd never expect. The weight of silence lifted the moment I stood. My bouquet, limp from the crush of my grip, slid from my fingers and landed on the polished floor with a sound so soft it might have been mistaken for surrender. But what followed wasn't. I walked around the table, deliberate steps, head high, and reached for the microphone still warm from Nadine's hand. She blinked, startled, then sneered, as if I were a child about to throw a tantrum in the middle of grown folks' business. But I wasn't a child, and this wasn't a tantrum. The guests hushed, plates half-cleared, drinks untouched, conversations suspended mid-sentence. Every eye was on me, some wide with anticipation, others narrowed with judgment. I didn't care. Not anymore. I brought the mic to my lips and let the silence breathe for a moment longer. Let it settle into every bone in the room. "Since when," I asked slowly, "did marriage mean slavery?" There was no scream, no shout. My voice didn't need volume to carry weight. It did on its own. A few claps broke out. Hesitant, unsure. Someone gasped. Somewhere in the back, a chair scraped against the floor. But I didn't look. I only looked at Nadine. She froze. Not fully, but enough. A twitch in her jaw. The flicker in her eyes, the moment she realized I was no longer playing the role she'd written for me. I continued. "Since when did loving someone mean giving up who you are?" No one moved. I turned to Randall. He'd been trying to sink into his seat like it might save him from being noticed. Too late. I locked eyes with him, and for the first time that night, he looked afraid, not of me, but of what I might say. "And since when did silence count as loyalty?" His face turned scarlet. His hands, which had just seconds ago been tugging at his collar, dropped to his lap. He didn't speak. He couldn't. "You had a chance," I said, softer now, "to speak up, to say something when they tried to reduce me to a paycheck, a purse string, a pawn. But you chose quiet, again and again." Randall opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His mother leaned forward, ready to leap back into the spotlight, but I raised a hand. "Don't," I said, eyes on Nadine. "You've had enough of this room's attention." That shut her up. For now. I turned back to the crowd. "I'm not here to make a scene. I didn't come into this family to tear it down. But I won't let anyone strip me down either." Behind me, someone murmured, "About time." I didn't turn to see who. "I've spent most of my life being the quiet one," I continued. The good girl, the helper, the fixer, at home, at work, in every relationship that asked me to make myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. A beat. I let the words hang, then dropped them one by one. No more. Nadine shot to her feet. This is absurd. Sit down, Lorena. You're ruining your own wedding. I looked at her. Not with fury, not even pity, just certainty. No, I replied. You ruined it the moment you thought I was yours to control. Her mouth opened, but I went on. You called this tradition family duty, sacrifice. But let's call it what it really is. Manipulation, disguised in lace and prayers. Gasps again. This time, louder. Randall slammed his napkin on the table. You're embarrassing us. I laughed. Quietly. Us? No, Randall. I'm just telling the truth. Embarrassment only follows if you recognize it. He stood now, too, towering over me but looking small somehow. You're making a scene. I'm making a choice. He grabbed my wrist under the table just minutes ago. I still felt the imprint of his fingers, not from pain, but from what it meant, that when pushed, he didn't defend. He controlled. You had a moment to stand beside me, I said, voice low but firm. You chose to disappear. He stared, unmoving. I turned back to the crowd. My voice dropped, no longer sharp but intimate. We teach girls to be accommodating. To be kind, no matter the cost. We celebrate their patience, their humility, their ability to stay quiet, even when humiliated. I paused. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was steady, clear. Well, I've been quiet enough. Nadine lunged for the mic. Enough of this nonsense! But her voice didn't carry the way mine had. She sounded shrill, desperate. The crowd didn't lean toward her. They leaned back. You had your speech, I told her, holding the mic tighter. And now I've had mine. Somewhere to my right, my father finally stood. Not rushing the stage, not interrupting, just standing, head high, hands shaking slightly, eyes on me, proud, silent. And for the first time that night, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like solidarity. I looked around one final time, at the cousins who laughed earlier, now silent, at the aunt with her judgmental eyes, blinking in disbelief, at the bridesmaid, dabbing her eyes. And then I said it. The sentence I never thought I'd say out loud, not here, not now, but the one I'd been carrying like a stone in my chest. This marriage, this night, it was built on a lie, and I won't carry that into my future. Murmurs erupted. A fork dropped. The tension in the room snapped like thread pulled too tight. I set the mic down, gently, as if it were something sacred. Then I stepped back. Nadine stared, stunned, mouth open like she'd just watched a building collapse. Randall didn't move, not toward me, not away. He just sat, like a man watching a train leave without him. And me? I walked away, not from love, not from hope, but from a life that demanded my silence as its entry fee, because the next words out of my mouth would decide whether I walked away in shame or left them on their knees. The weight of the microphone in my hand wasn't heavy, but what I was about to say would be. All eyes were on me. Nadine's smug expression had frozen somewhere between victory and confusion. Randall's face had gone a pale, sickly white, like he just realized this wasn't going to be the performance he thought it would be. I stood at the center of the reception hall, the chandeliers above no longer glowing. They felt like they were glaring down. Around me, silence stretched so long it could crack. I wasn't going to do this tonight, I began, my voice steady. But when people spend so much effort trying to publicly humiliate you, maybe public truth is the only fair response. Nadine shifted in her seat, a hand brushing her hair back like that might keep control in place. She tried to speak, but I raised a single hand. "No, you've had your turn," I said softly. "Now it's mine." I reached into the clutch I had hidden beneath the head table and pulled out the small folder. It was simple, no drama in its appearance, just clean printouts, neatly clipped together. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a copy of 3 years' worth of withdrawals from Randall's trust account, large ones, all authorized by one name." I turned to the crowd, then back to Nadine. Hers. Gasps erupted. People shifted in their seats, trying to whisper discreetly, but their voices ricocheted around the room. One woman actually leaned forward like it was a soap opera she couldn't believe was live. Nadine stood. "How dare you? You forged Randall's access for the first 6 months," I said, not flinching. "Then you convinced him to sign a power of attorney document under the guise of family consolidation. You drained over $160,000 in less than a year and used my engagement to cover it all up." Nadine's eyes darted around the room like she was searching for someone to stop me. But no one moved. Even Randall didn't get up. "And what's worse," I said, my voice lowering, "is that Randall knew." He flinched like I'd slapped him. He let her take it. He let her lie. And when I found out, you know what he said to me? I turned to him now. He looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I'd just grown in that moment. He said, "It's family business. Don't make noise." A ripple of stunned discomfort crossed the crowd. Several guests exchanged glances. One older man leaned in to whisper to his wife. Another relative, one of Nadine's cousins, I think, folded her arms and shook her head, not at me, but at them. I stayed quiet. "At first," I continued, "I didn't want to ruin tonight. But the truth is, tonight was never mine. This wedding, this whole production, it was a show meant to distract from a theft, a setup." I took a breath. And when I looked out across the hall, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt awake. I was supposed to walk down the aisle grateful. To be chosen. To be absorbed into a family that sees obedience as a virtue and silence as loyalty. I paused. Let the weight of that sink in. But I was never a volunteer in this. I was a target. Randall finally stood. "Lorena, enough." I turned toward him. "No," I said. "You don't get to say that word to me. Not after tonight." His jaw clenched, but there was no comeback. He couldn't stop this. Couldn't stop me. Marriage is not a transaction. It's not a merger. And I am not a line item in your mother's accounting spreadsheet. I walked over to the edge of the head table where my bouquet had been resting. I picked it up, looked at it. The petals were already wilting under the spotlight. Then I let it fall. The sound of it hitting the floor wasn't loud, but somehow it echoed. "My money, my name, my dignity," I said into the mic. "They do not belong to this family. Not tonight. Not ever." Nadine stepped forward, arms rigid at her sides. "This is disgraceful." "No," I cut in. What's disgraceful is thinking you could buy a woman's life for a ring and a catered meal." I set the mic down gently. Not dropped, not thrown, just placed. And I turned. I took 3 steps before I heard it, a chair scraping back, then another. I didn't stop. I reached the door as someone, maybe Aunt Clara, maybe one of Randall's own cousins, stood and said, "She's right." Then came a few more murmurs, a few more feet moving. Behind me, the silence had cracked. Not with applause, not yet, but with something better. Doubt. And for the first time all evening, Nadine had nothing to say. She stood frozen, watching me walk away. And I didn't look back. Not until I reached the double doors. And even then, I didn't look for her. I looked forward, because I knew the next room I walked into would be mine, and the life I was about to build, it wouldn't need their permission. Because when I left that hall, I thought I was walking away alone. But I was wrong. I didn't hear the murmurs turn into shouts. I didn't see the fingers pointed at Nadine or the faces turning cold toward Randall. But later, I'd learn how it all unfolded, how truth, once spoken, doesn't politely step aside. It spreads. I'd barely made it to the parking lot when Aunt Clara followed me out. She didn't say much, just touched my shoulder and whispered, "That took more courage than most people manage in a lifetime." Her eyes were wet. Mine weren't. Not yet. Back at my apartment, I changed out of the wedding dress alone. No zipped-up fairy tale moment, just me and a stubborn zipper, a mirror, and the sudden realization that I didn't feel broken. I felt clean. The living room was dim. I didn't bother with the overhead light, just a warm lamp in the corner. I made tea, sat barefoot on the old couch, and let silence fill the room like water in a glass. It didn't drown me. It held me. Then my phone buzzed. At first I thought it might be my father, but it wasn't. It was Miranda, the cousin who always stood a little too close to Nadine, always echoed her opinions like a loyal echo. Her text was simple. "You should know what's happening here." Attached was a photo. Nadine, slumped in a chair. Randall, standing nearby, red-faced, arms folded tight like a child who got caught stealing. Behind them, a half-empty room. The people who'd smiled for the cameras earlier now wore looks of disgust and disbelief. According to Miranda, someone had stood up after I left and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You let her be sacrificed so you could stay comfortable." The voice was Caleb, Randall's own cousin, the one Nadine used to brag about helping through college. Apparently, it opened the floodgates. Someone else asked where the missing money went. Another brought up how Nadine's business had mysteriously been under renovation for over a year. And suddenly, no one wanted to pretend anymore. But it was what happened around midnight that stunned me most. A different text, from the doorman of my building, James, the quiet one who always wore bow ties. He wrote, "2 people here asking for you, loud. I told them to wait in the lobby. Should I call someone?" I walked downstairs, slowly, still in sweatpants and a hoodie, my hair pulled back with no thought. I didn't expect what I saw. Nadine and Randall, on their knees, literally, there, in the middle of the lobby. Nadine's designer coat pooled around her like a throne discarded. Randall stared at the tile. Not at me, at the floor. A young woman from the second floor paused by the mailboxes, watching with wide eyes. A man I didn't know walked in from outside, stopped mid-step. No one said a word. Nadine looked up first. Her makeup was smeared. Her voice cracked before she even said my name. "Lorena, we didn't mean for it to go this far." I didn't move. Randall followed, his words tumbling. "We just need to talk. Privately. To clarify some things before the family meeting tomorrow." "Clarify," I repeated. Not a question. Not an answer. He nodded, desperate. "We can't let this define us. It's already gotten out. There are photos. Comments online. We need to fix this. Together." Together. They wanted me to help them save face. Patch the wreckage. Make it all look like a misunderstanding. Nadine added quickly, "If you just say you exaggerated, that it was all a misunderstanding between in-laws, you can still be part of this family. We can salvage the narrative." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "I don't need your apology," I said calmly. "I needed my freedom. And tonight, I took it back." Randall reached for my hand. I stepped away. "You had every chance," I said, voice even. "You stood by while your mother gutted your future and then tried to bury me in the rubble." I looked at them one last time. "I'm not your shield, I'm not your scapegoat, and I'm not your wife." Then I turned around and walked back toward the elevator. I didn't care who saw them kneeling. If anything, I hoped someone took a photo. Let that image live forever. Later that night, back in my living room, I curled up with the same cup of tea, cold now, untouched. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it. Instead, I picked up a book I'd started months ago but never finished. Something about reclaiming your story, and for the first time in a long while, I read every page. I'd lost a wedding, yes, but I'd never lost myself. I'd lost Randall, but he was never really mine. I'd lost their approval, but found my own voice. And that voice? It was louder than anything they ever tried to drown it in. I didn't cry that night. I didn't toast to freedom or play empowerment anthems. I simply folded the blanket over my legs, let the lamp cast its soft glow, and listened to the peace that had always been waiting on the other side of silence. Some scars never fade, but neither does strength. And as I closed the door that night, I realized I hadn't walked away from a family. I had walked back into myself,